He was very open to us in explaining what was going on and why and what the difficulties were, so that we got quite a good education in that sense. And it was the friends I made, children of other diplomats, thought that was unusual because they said their parents never discussed their professional lives with them at all. So I was very grateful for that experience. My mother was a great believer in, if you want to teach a kid to swim, you throw him in a body of water, and when the kid started drowning, it was time enough to go in and fetch him out. So everywhere we lived, within a couple of weeks, I was placed in the local school. Well, if you can imagine being put in a school, you don't understand a word of that language, and the kids would kind of, gather and they talk to each other, and they're talking about you. That was a great incentive to learn languages in record time, because I wanted to find out what they were saying. And so no matter where we lived, I got put in the local school. Well, in order to have continuity in my education, whenever we were away from Japan, I had a tutor. And so I followed the Japanese school curriculum, and in the morning, every morning. And the afternoon is when I went to the local schools. Many of the schools I went to were Catholic schools, because in those countries, schools were run by the Catholic Church. But I remember the first day at the Sacred Heart Convent in Brussels, and I was what they call a day boarder. I had lunch in their dining room. And I walked into this dining room and had these brown bottles with the porcelain tops, which are beer bottles. And I was absolutely floored. I thought, they're serving beer. To me, beer was something that, only drunkards drank. And so I went home, and big eyes, I told my mother, they serve beer at that school. Well, the water quality in Belgium is terrible. And so they drank beer. At the time, I remember thinking that this was a terribly hard life. To have to learn different languages, and to lose friends that you'd made and had to make new ones. And I remember telling my mother that when I grew up, I was going to stay put in one place. I didn't care where, but I was going to stay put. Well, the funny thing is that when I married Ken and we were in Lansing, he was going to school. After about a couple of years, I said to Ken, I'm tired of being in one place. I've heard many psychologists expound on the fact that constant change is not good for children. But I have to disagree. I suppose it depends on the child, but by necessity, I adjust it. Yeah, the bombings were quite severe in Tokyo, where we lived, where our house was. But I was already at our summer house up in the mountains with my mother, which we were to avoid the bombings, and we actually went there long before. But that was my senior year of high school. And I wanted to have that piece of paper that said I'd graduated. So in spite of not having attended classes for the whole year, I went back to Tokyo and studied as I never have before or since to take the final exams to get my diploma. And one of the nights that I was down there, the air raid siren went off and there were bombs. My dad was in the air raid shelter, but I never heard anything, slept right through it, and gave my dad fits. But that was the only bombing that I experienced, because I was only down there probably a couple of weeks studying to take the finals. Incidentally, I did pass the finals, and I did get that diploma. After the war, my sister and I decided to go back to where our house used to be. We knew it had been bombed, but the house was totally flattened. The only interesting thing was the upstairs bathtub was still hanging up there in the air by the pipe.